Hello, everybody. We're back again with another Morgoth review. And this week I'm joined by Arya and Jim, third and producing as usual. And this week we've got Sven Longshanks. Hello, Sven. How are you doing?
I'm Morgoth. Yeah, doing well, doing pretty good. Thank you very much for inviting me on. I've spoken to you many times by messaging, but never actually
Yeah,
spoken to you over the internet. So yeah, looking forward.
it's the first time we've actually spoke like voice to voice, man to man, and it's been a long time coming actually. But so we've got all this censorship and all this bannings going on, and I wanted to dig into it a bit. And I know you're more in touch with me than the sort of boots on the ground nationalist movement in the Britain, and I'd like to get your perspective on this because there's this huge song and dance about Count Dankula. He's actually a communist YouTuber, and the Nazi pug thing, and we don't know if he's going to go to jail or not yet. And now all the sort of classic liberal skeptic crowd, the liberalists, are crying their eyes out, and it's all, oh God, it's the end of the world, and the fascists are back. and I watched some of these reply videos, and I thought that our people have been getting hammered by this stuff for years, and there was no big song and dance about it. There was no nationalists have been getting blasted, locked up for years on end. And then you've got this sort of commie degenerate goes down, or he's persecuted, and it's as if this is a watershed moment. This can't go on. And I mean, we've got Alison Chabot is almost the same situation, because then she sang some songs about the Jews, about the Holocaust, and it was satirical, and she was poking fun at them, and I can well imagine it got on their nerves. I can well imagine they didn't like it, but she's had her life absolutely destroyed because of this stuff. And I can bet you all these big YouTubers who are crying their eyes out about Count Dankula and know nothing about it. We just had to, and another thing that I want to get into is that we've tried to explain to them the nature of the true power in this country and in the West as it is now, this sort of malignant force, because they'll do endless videos on the symptoms but not the actual cause of the problems. And what interests me about the Count Dankula thing is that they've actually been confronted directly with the cause. He trained his dog to say something about Jews, and then it did a Nazi salute. And they've inadvertently stumbled into they've gone into the forbidden zone by accident. And now they see, now they should be understanding that we were right all along. And they're not. I mean, so what was the situation with Alison Chabot? What's she facing now?
Well, the situation with her is different. I mean, this is the point. I think is like you were saying. I mean, this guy Count Dankula, he's a communist, and what he was doing with his joke with the pug dog. I mean, he's got a lovely, sweet little dog there, and he thought, what I'll do is I'll make the dog look as evil as possible. Who's the most evil person I can think of? Adolf Hitler. So he gets the dog to make the Hitler salute, meaning trying to make, just to make people laugh. But it's not as if he was saying, well, I support National Socialism. He's going along completely with the narrative that Adolf Hitler is the most evil man ever.
Yeah.
And yet he's still being charged with this. And now you've got the celebrities coming out like Ricky Gervais and David Baddiel say, oh, this is terrible. He's making a joke. But are they going to come out for the same thing about Alison Chabot, who also sings satirical songs, but she is pointing out the lies that a lot of these so-called Holocaust witnesses talk about, like eating diamonds and pooping them out every day and then eating them again to smuggle them past the guards. People being gassed and escaping because the gas was turned off. People being brought up on walls, people with tattoos that appear and disappear. That sort of humor. So this is the test. I mean, you've got these hypocritical celebrities saying, "Oh, free speech. If you don't like to hear it, that's the real test of whether you support free speech is if you don't like to hear it." But the fact is, Count Dacula was going along with all that. He was saying that Hitler was the bad guy. So will they still stand up for someone like Alison Shablow, who is questioning the World War II narrative and questioning the gas chambers? And I don't think they will. And she's not the only one. If we're going to just be talking about humour here, Joshua Bonehill, he's still in prison. He was given 4 years, and this was for a cartoon meme. One of them was for a cartoon of a Jew, Happy Merchant, Auschwitz. Yeah, you remember? The other one was of that Liverpudlian MP, and she was holding Chaka Amuna in her arms and feeding him. So it was 2 comedy memes. People thought it was his demonstration against Jews, but it clearly wasn't his demonstration against Jews, because that still went ahead. Jez Turner gave the speech there, and Jez is he's going to be in court next month for this speech.
Well, what's Jez up for? What happened? What's happening with him?
Well, what he said he said for the last 2 centuries, or at least since the last 2 world wars, our government has been working for the interests of Jews and not for the interests of the British people, and that's what it centres on. I think he said it since the French Revolution.
And what's charged hate speech or what?
I think he's being charged with inciting racial or religious hatred, and Alison Shablow is being charged with grossly offensive. It's the same wording as Count Dacula, grossly offensive. So questions on who is the one that is offended, and surely you choose to be offended. That's the point of it. It's a personal choice whether you are offended at something or not. And we were always taught, I'm sure you were taught as well, Morgoth, sticks and stones may hurt my bones, but words will never hurt me.
Yeah.
You're supposed to rise above it.
And in both cases with Count Dacula and Alison, you've had this in Scotland. It was this sort of, they've got these really bland names. It's like the Jewish Community Secretary Trust, and in Britain, I think it's the Council for Anti-Semitic Action or something like that. They've really got these bland names, but they're very sinister and powerful. And there's one, Gideon Falter, has just constantly hounded Alison Shablow, and they doxed her. They posted her Moa's address, and that same group is going after Gilad Atzmon now. I saw somebody posted in the comments of the blog or something that Gilad Atzmon, and he's Jewish, and Gilad Atzmon is, I'm sure there's a big, some theories around him. I don't know what the deal is, but he actually calls out these Jewish groups for misusing this kind of power and for abusing and for shutting people down all of the time. And he sees that's bad. But and they're going after him as well because he's broke ranks. He's broke ranks, and he's speaking out against it. And the point is, for the sort of the liberalist, classic liberal skeptic kind of people with all these big YouTube channels, well, they're always going on about the alt-right and the SJWs, and they're always going on about identity politics, and yet now they're being confronted with a group. It's taking away somebody. They're against freedom of speech, so that's a no-no for them. They're trying to take away people's individual liberty because they're going to be jailed. They're using collective power as based on an ethnic or racial interest, so that's identity politics. So that's the third no-no for the classic liberals. And they're using all of these things to warp the political process in their own will. So it's like a full deck of things that get on their nerves, things that they constantly complain about, if it's Muslims or the alt-right or feminists or anything like this, the SJWs. They constantly whinge when other people play at this game. But then I think, if you really want to get stuck into a group who tick all the boxes, then here you are, boys. Now you're being confronted with it. Now you see why nationalists have been getting battered for decades. And here's the group, and they've just done it to one of your own. And these response videos that I've seen, they still don't get it. It's like, oh, the government's gone crazy. The government and the government's become SJWs.
Blaming the government, aren't they? They're not actually looking at the group, the lobby group that is responsible for it. They just blame the government.
Blame the government.
The thing, I haven't heard one of them mention the name of the group that is behind it. And you've got Tommy Robinson. He's been interviewing Dankula, and he's been talking about it and highlighting it. He hasn't mentioned it either. But it's exactly the same group that's gone after Alison Chabot. That's the campaign against anti-Semitism. And they claim that they're a charity, but they're extremely wealthy. They have audiences with Theresa May. They have audiences with Amber Rudd. They had a lot to do with the former nationalist group National Action being banned as terrorists when they had never committed any violent act. They had a lot to do with that one as well. And in the Alison Chabot case, they've been found out through a Freedom of Information request that they were effectively bribing the police and saying to the police, come down to London, we'll show you around the synagogue, we'll take you out for dinner, we'll take you to a restaurant, and would you please make sure that you go down really hard on Alison Chabot. And they kept going on and on at the police until that's
disgusting. That's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah. Well, she's got the proof of it with the Freedom of Information Act. But this group, they've got such front to be doing this and claiming to be victims. I mean, they're also claiming that they were somehow victims at the anti-Shomrim demonstration, and you had about 1,000 of this particular group of people that were screaming for Jez Turner's blood. And then you've got Jez Turner there, one man with the police in front of him, and they're claiming that they are the victims. Now, when they tried to take this to court, they were told, sorry, Mr. Falter, but you're not actually a victim in this. You don't have any victims' rights. They said, we cannot take Jez to court over this. And the Crown Prosecution Service said, well, there isn't a case to answer to. And then with the power of that group, the campaign against anti-Semitism and their lobbying, they forced the Crown Prosecution Service to have a judicial review, which, I mean, we have people in the nationalist movement who have tried to get judicial reviews started, and there's no chance of any of us doing it. But they managed to get a judicial review started and then forced the Crown Prosecution Service to go ahead with this case against him. That's how much power that they've got, this tiny lobby group. It's the same one in both cases. And what they're basically saying is if anyone says anything we don't like, we will use the police to shut them up. And they just scream about how anyone that criticizes them, makes jokes about them, they should be locked up. And they don't see anything wrong in thinking that either. They think they are entitled to have anyone that disagrees with them locked up. And as you point out, it's the liberals and well, not the liberals, but it's the skeptic side and the Tommy Robinsons. They will just point out that it's the government, but they won't point out that this is actually Jews that are doing this.
Yeah, I mean,
with the Count Dankula case, the narrative at least seems to be that it was the police, like the hate crime department, went. They found this video on YouTube and they went to this Jewish, like this Scottish Jewish community organization, and they asked the Jewish community if they were offended. So they had to go out and find people to be offended so that they could use Count Dankula as a scapegoat to like attack free speech. Basically, that's what seems to have happened. I'm not sure to what extent that's happened, but when you look at where have these hate crime laws even come from? Like, why are they being enforced in this way?
Yeah, it's that's another thing that I was going to get into. I had an old blog at the ready, not one of mine. I think I posted it back in the day. It was from an old blog. It's defunct now. It's still up, called boulder.org or something. And he runs through over the decades. I should have had it up. We had a bit of a bad start, and it was my fault. But badly organised tonight. But it was, you can go back through the decades, and it started with something like public order offences, where if you said something racist, originally, and they were all Jewish groups and Jewish people in Parliament, and Jews are overrepresented in the Houses of Parliament by 300%. So even if you're just going to sort of blame the government, then you're going to have to look at who's running the government and who's dominant in the halls of power in British politics. So if the skeptics want to try that, well, that's not going to work either. But yeah, it was. You can go back to people like mainly people in the Home Office where Amber Rudd is now, and she's 15 years in jail and banning people from coming to the country and all this kind of thing. But in the past, you had Michael Howard, Gerald Kaufman, Leon Britton, and then there was various groups. One of them, like I say, there are all these bland names. I can't remember, but there was somebody called S. Cohen, and there was a Nagler, and basically what they were doing, it started out with the public order offence. I think, I mean, Jim may know more than me about this, but the public order offence, like I said, these Jewish groups and Jewish lobbies, these hate laws are all their work. But it started off where you really had to go to the house of a black man and like put his windows through and put graffiti across the walls and stuff like that. And when I was a kid, that was what was understood to be racism. Where, I mean, you can't really defend that at all. That you can say, yeah, if you do that, I mean, you can't defend that. I mean, that's ridiculous. So yeah, okay, that should be illegal. You know, for God's sake, that's horrible. But then what happened is they just kept turning the screws and kind of cranking it up more and more. It's incrementalism until it gets to the point where, like Arya said, you post a joke on YouTube and then the police actually go along to the Jews to ask them if they're offended, and if they are, then you're going to have your life destroyed.
Can I just point out, Morgoth? Can I just point something out there? I mean, when you just brought up that example of, say, putting in through the windows and putting in dog mess through the door, and that's wrong, and that should rightly be a crime. Well, it is already a crime. It doesn't need to be aggravated. Yeah. This is the difference, isn't it? They said, but because it's a minority that's being done to, then it needs extra criminal punishment for it. You need an extra strong sentence, and that was the start of it. And the start of that, say, well, no, we're not all equal under the law. This group of people are more equal than this other group of people, and that was the start of it. That's what's grown to what it is today. But that's what, you know, right back then, it was the start of it, and saying that people aren't equal, but people just didn't see that. And to be honest, when you look at what they're doing today, you know, I think, well, people should have fought back then. You know, yes, it is shocking putting in through windows and dog's mess and that sort of thing, but is that more shocking than raping 1,400 white girls in Rotherham, blowing yourselves up on a train, blowing kids, you know?
There are two separate issues here. Firstly, those racially aggravated crimes. So if you do something that's ordinarily criminal, but you do it to a protected group, then you get an enhanced sentence. That would be the smashing windows and graffitiing and that kind of thing. So these things are already criminal, but if you do it to someone who is a protected group, you'll be extra harshly punished. What I think's become apparent in the last couple of weeks between the Britain First prosecutions and their jailings and also the Count Dankula thing, is there's been a two-pronged attack on freedom of speech. Traditionally, it's always been held that you have freedom to speak and to state your opinion as long as you don't incite violence or, you know, sort of cause any massive social upheaval. What's happening now is if you say anything that is disapproved of in public, then it'll be cracked down on via harassment and public order offences and the kind of things that happened to Jada Francis, is it, or the Britain First people? That if you speak in public, they will crack down on you that way. if you speak on the internet, as Count Dankula did and Alison Chablot and countless other people, then you'll be prosecuted under these various Communications Act and the sort of the hate speech style regulations. So you can't speak in public and you can't speak on the internet. So in theory, you now have freedom of speech so long as you only speak in your own home to yourself. And even then, you better not say it loudly enough that anyone else might hear you. I mean, the freedom of speech has effectively been taken away because you can't say anything that anyone else might hear.
Right.
I think the one.
What was it the Communications Act section 127? What was it that you were talking about earlier? Do you want to go through that?
Well, that's right. Well, what Count Dankula was actually charged under was section 127 of the Communications Act. I think it's 2003. And what that says, a person is guilty of an offence if he A, sends by means of a public electronic communications network a message or other matter that is grossly offensive or of an indecent, obscene or menacing character, or B, causes a message to be so sent. So looking at that, the first obvious question is, what does grossly offensive mean? And grossly offensive to whom? Normally in a statute, you will have a definition section which will say this is what we mean by this phrase and this is what we mean by that phrase, so the courts can interpret it. But there's no definition section in this act, so the legislators give no guidance whatsoever as to what grossly offensive means or who grossly offensive applies to. Does it apply to one person? Does it apply to the reasonable man, or does it apply to society at large? It just doesn't say that. So it's near impossible for any person sort of trying to regulate their speech or comply with the law to know exactly what they can and can't say. And that, in my view, is the purpose of this kind of legislation. It's not there to guide you and to let you know, okay, I can say this and I can't say that and I'd better be careful. It's there to sort of have a chilling effect on free speech as a whole. And I think that's deeply worrying. What I would like to see is some of these cases be appealed up to the higher courts, and and decisions be laid down to the effect that these things can be said and these things can't be said, and to clarify the meanings of some of these sections. But so far as I'm aware, not one of these cases has yet reached the higher courts, so no clarification has been given. So as things stand, no one has the faintest clue what they can or can't say without being subject to prosecution, and that just goes contrary to everything British law has stood for centuries. The whole sort of purpose of law is to be clear and to let people know what you can do and what you can do and what is criminal and what isn't. And any law which doesn't do that is bad law. And this is categorically bad law, but I think it's designed that way.
When you talk about the chilling effect on freedom of speech, it goes hand in hand with a tweet that Police Scotland put out this week, which said, "You may think online you are anonymous. You can create fake profiles and no one can trace you. That's wrong. The messages you type and send can be traced back to you. The same laws apply to online messages, images and videos. What you post can affect you later in life." And they've got a series of like pictures of like be greater than a hater, and they're like childish images. And you see the same things like there was Transport for London put up a thing with they had these posters with like Big Brother eyes looking and saying, "Oh, Transport for London is watching you," and things like that. And there's all these adverts and posters they're putting up. They're all like deliberately trying to scare people. And and there was the Sadiq Khan did that video about hate speech. It's like an entire campaign to make people scared to express their opinions. And
well, that's it. I think that's interesting in and of itself, because it's only the most extreme and severe communications that could potentially become criminal. But they are trying to give the ordinary member of the public the impression that you had better not step out of line, you had better not say anything that doesn't comply with the PC orthodoxy, or else we'll be right down on you. So that the fact that police are sending out these messages and trying to have that chilling effect on public speech is appalling.
I mean, this is the interesting thing, because if just The funny thing about the sort of classic liberal brigade is that, I mean, they talk a good fight, but they don't actually do very much. They blather on endlessly about freedom of speech, but they never actually do anything with it. They never push the boundaries with it. They always stay firmly in the center ground, where they're not going to rock the boat too much. Endless videos about feminists and a bit of Islam bashing chucked in there as well. Whereas it's been the nationalists who've been on the outer fringes. It's been the nationalists who've been pushing the boundaries. Let's just take Jez Turner's speech, where he's talking about Britain being under the heel of this sort of Rothschild Zionist empire for 200 years and that kind of thing. Now that's a serious issue, and they're going to try and lock them up for it. And the classic liberals were not there, because they I think the sort of mainstream, let's just say, what they did successfully was to sort of section off what they would call the far right. So far right ideas or nationalist ideas or neo-Nazi ideas, that's how they would frame it. And so nobody would take them seriously. They would never have to think about them seriously. And then when somebody like Jez Turner's being locked up or dragged onto like a show trial thing, persecuted basically, that they wouldn't really care that much, because they would see, well, that's just a far right problem. It's just that crazy stuff the far right talk about, and I don't have to bother myself about it too much. But they never kind of step back and think, well, why? Why is it that this idea, just to go back to the sort of Britain's been enslaved for hundreds of years to this sort of Jewish banking cartel, if that was, just to try and add a few quotes in there so the channel doesn't get shut down and I don't go to jail. That's what Jez Turner said. Then people have sort of compartmentalized it. Well, I don't need to worry about that. That's just the way the Nazis. This is just what the Nazis talk about. And now it's landing on their doorstep. Now they're starting to see, well, actually they're coming for us all. And it's like that first they came for the gays and I wasn't a gay, and then they came for the transgenders and I wasn't. I mean, first they came for the nationalists, and they've been battering us for years and years. What's that, Sven?
I was just saying, I think what they're also realizing now is that truth is no defense. I mean, the truth was that this Dankula, he wasn't a nationalist. He wasn't a nationalist of any kind. He didn't have any sympathies with nationalism, and yet he's been prosecuted for that because one group of people didn't like what he was saying. And this highlights another point of something that's happened in law. And it used to be that you used to have to prove that there was an intent to actually commit a crime. And they still say intent to incite racial hatred, but they no longer have to prove that there's any intent to actually commit a crime. It's taken away from personal responsibility of the person that's being charged with the crime. Doesn't matter what their personal responsibility is now. It's all down to whether a minority doesn't like what you're saying.
Yeah, it's subjective.
Well,
Yeah.
the thing with this case is that the courts got to decide what the context and what he meant by it was. So even in the video, at the beginning of the video, he specifically stated that it was a joke, but the courts got to decide what he meant by it, and they got to decide that he was choosing to incite racial hatred. It's just absurd.
I mean, it's the equivalent of like in this, because people keep saying, "Oh, well, what you see it on Twitter? So, welcome to the fascist UK," and it gets on your nerves, obviously, because in actual fact, the what Jim was saying about the laws being vague, in an actual fascist country, the laws are not vague. You can say the laws are draconian, but they're not vague. You're told exactly what you can and can't do and what's acceptable and what is not acceptable. The laws in, let's say, the Soviet Union especially in the early days of the bloodbath with the Bolsheviks. And everybody knows who was involved with that. We can get into that another time. The laws in the Soviet, the laws in a fascist state aren't actually vague. You know where you stand all of the time, even if you think they're harsh or whatever. But the laws in the Soviet Union were vague. The laws, like I say, in the early days, where you'd see a farmer and he was fixing his tractor. Well, it wouldn't be his tractor; it would be the state's tractor. And they would ask him, like, are you destroying that tractor? And he would say, no, I'm fixing it. And then that would go to the courts, and the courts would decide that, well, by fixing the tractor, you made it worse. So we're going to say that you were a sabotager and sort of what they would call a wrecker, and that you're an enemy of the people, and we're going to have you shot. And that was the end of him. So you can't really argue against that kind of logic. That's what we're dealing with now. It's deliberately confusing, and it's subjective on the part of the minorities. It's subjective on the part of the courts and the law. And could you just mute yourself for a second, Jim? It's subjective on the part of the minorities. It's subjective on the part of the courts and the law. So and now when we've established that the minorities are the protected group, then the only people so you've made it racial. So then what you've got is white people being left as being, well, in a very bad situation. Because it's purely up to the minorities, and then now with this latest case, the courts on if you're innocent or guilty, and they're gonna say that you're guilty.
Well, Black Pigeon Speaks put out a video either today or yesterday where he called it anarcho tyranny, where they're sort of trying to have it both ways, and so they can say that they've got fair rules, but then they can enforce them in a way that's grossly unfair. But basically, they're not enforcing the law properly, and they're choosing to do it against political enemies.
Yeah,
that's the anarcho-tyrannical part.
Yeah, it's a good video. I remember reading I think it was Sam Francis. I remember reading the article a long time ago. It's an interesting concept, and that is what they're doing. But why? It's again. I mean, I think.
Well, it's sort of about the political class entrenching their power, and about outside groups like teaming up with the political class to keep them in power and to enforce the will of like these other outside minority groups, like globalist financial classes and that sort of thing.
I mean, I was reading it was a Steven Pinker, who's also Jewish, has come out with this book about the Enlightenment now, and I mean, we could do a whole hangout on that. But one of the things he mentioned was that so he's like this sort of classic liberal. He is a bit left leaning, but and he was just talking about the scourge of the alt-right and populism, and about how it's the sort of last dying gasp of the white middle-aged Christian male and all of that. And again, I mean, and I think, well, and so he's looking at it from a classic liberal perspective, but he is basically siding with the elites. And I just wonder how the sort of the classic liberals on YouTube, who we watch their videos, and the Count Dankula, Sargon kind of crowd, how do they look at that then? Because they are in the category of they again, you have that pattern. It's a pattern which is emerging again and again. So now you've got another Jewish intellectual who is saying that when they make these angry videos against Muslims or even feminists, which is their standard fodder, that well, it doesn't matter because they're just this dying demographic, and in a couple of decades it won't matter anymore how angry you get. We've still got a bit of punch now, but that's going to change. And in the end, I just can't see these people, these other political groups who aren't loony lefties. I just don't see that they've got a leg to stand on at all, and they may as well just throw their lot in with us, to be honest, because they're not getting any kind of institutional support whatsoever. They're on the hit list as well, and I would say you may as well just be hung for a sheep as a lamb, and or how the saying goes, I forgot. Yeah, okay, I'm a white nationalist.
Steven Pinker, I'm not sure if it was in his book or not, but I think it might have been in an interview about the book. He was specifically decrying white identity politics, and then in the next sentence he would go on to explain the importance of Jewish identity politics. And it's just like every single one of them has that same double standard. And Jordan Peterson's another one as well. And we were talking about, he put this article about the JQ up on his website this week, where he was talking about he was trying to dismiss this this idea of a conspiracy amongst Jews. So the article in it, he says basically that Ashkenazi Jewish people have higher IQs on average. That higher IQ is linked to openness to experience, like one of these personality traits, the big 5 personality traits, and that is linked to liberal or leftist politics. So that somehow explains away how like 95% of the Bolsheviks were Jewish, and all these revolutionary groups are dominated by Jewish people.
Because when this comes up, what tends to happen is that people pull out a load of statistics and they'll point out that even if we accept the high IQ thing, they are overrepresented, let's say in the British Parliament, by 300%. That's still too much. They're not 300% smarter than the British. And that's the kind of arguments that get pulled out of the hat when people try to debunk. And that's fair enough, I understand that. But I would be saying, especially to the classic liberal crowd, and Jordan Peterson himself, who is kind of like the king of the classic liberals, how does that explain the behavior of the ADL? How does that even explain the existence of the ADL?
Well, every time Jordan Peterson posts like anything about this, anything about like Jewish overrepresentation, there's always like, I've been reposting them on these links that he's been posting about this article about the JQ. I was reposting some of them as well, but even when like someone's tweeted out the statistics, and it goes through all about how Jewish people have like 10% of the highest SAT scores in America, but they're like 25% of people who go to Harvard, and like white people have 70 something percent of the highest SAT scores, but they're only like 20% of the people that go to Harvard, or it's like ridiculously. Just those statistics alone show how there's something going on that isn't fair. And it points out how there are like way more higher IQ people of white people, just out of the fact that like there's a higher like there are more white people.
I know
so that there are more higher IQ white people than there are Jewish people in total. Yet Jewish people are massively overrepresented in who gets to go to these higher institutions.
I know that's the exact argument that I've said.
It's posted on every single time he talks about it, and he never addresses it. Everything that he said in that article is refuted every single time he's ever even posted about it. And he's posted this article and he's just ignored all of these criticisms that completely refute every single point in the article. And then Paul Joseph Watson and all these other people are reposting it like, oh, alt-right BTFO, or white nationalist, white identity politics BTFO, and every single one of these points has already been refuted every single time it's posted. It's just absurd.
But I mean, what I'm saying is
their inability, their complete inability to withstand criticism, though. I mean, if he says, well, they've got these high IQs, that's how they get into all these positions. Well, why do they need to have special laws to protect them from?
And he's also, by saying that they have higher IQs, he's also accepting every single point that the white nationalists make about race realism as well.
What were you saying there, Sven? Yep.
Well, I was just saying that even with the new law that they've got, they've actually brought a new definition of anti-Semitism, and as I say, going back to this intent thing, part of the wording in it is, even if you may be saying something positive about the Jews, if the Jews decide that it's not positive, then it's anti-Semitism and you could be prosecuted. So it basically says they can have anyone prosecuted they like, because it comes down to their say-so as to whether it's anti-Semitic or not. So why would they need to have that if they were in the position that they are in, purely off the strength of how bright and geniuses they are and how wonderful they are at doing things? They really wouldn't need that, would they?
That's also the point that in Way of the World's video about Jordan Peterson's hypocrisy on the JQ, he has a video of Jordan Peterson speaking at all these events about the Holocaust, and he's going around to all these places giving speeches, sucking up to Jewish people. And there's one where he's sat on stage with Ezra Levant, this Jewish guy. Is it the Rebel Media he runs or something like that? And he sat on stage talking about Jewish overrepresentation. He's saying oh, well, it's just because Jewish people have higher IQs, that's why they're. And you see even Ezra Levant is getting uncomfortable even when he's saying positive things about the Jews, and even when he's trying to dismiss these conspiracy theories, the fact that he's talking about it is enough to make Ezra Levant uncomfortable about it.
There's also, going back to this, the ambiguousness of these laws. We don't actually have Holocaust denial laws in Britain, but on the ones that they have on the continent, there's no specific wording about that either. There's because when Sylvia Stoltz, who was the lawyer that went to defend, I forget his name as well. I've got a terrible forgetful name tonight, but Sylvia Stoltz was defending a very, very famous revisionist in court, and she went looking into the laws to find out exactly what it was that he wasn't allowed to say, and she discovered that there was nothing actually in there. And the courts decided that the Holocaust it did happen because it did happen. They couldn't actually cite any particular research that had been done into it, any autopsies, any tests on the gas. All they said was the specific wording was whatever came out of the Nuremberg trials. And then she ended up being sent to court or being sent to prison for defending her client. And now they said you've got two options. You can either admit that you are insane, or you can admit guilt and please be lenient on me. And that's the only two options you've got, because if you start to argue your case, then you are denying the Holocaust in the courtroom. So again, that's contempt of court. So these laws have been made specifically ambiguous without any real definitions in them, just so that they can pick on the people that they want to pick on. I mean, Holocaust revisionism, looking into World War II and looking into the facts that happened there, and we've got people all over Europe that are just languishing away in prisons. There's a professor in Austria, and he's in prison under a law that was brought in about not bringing in a national socialist government after the war. And this is because he was in a group last year, European Action, that were doing revisionist work. And yet they've used this law as if he's trying to bring back the National Socialist government as if he was going to bring back to life Adolf Hitler and Hermann Goering and all the rest of them. And he's in prison, and nobody really knows about it. We've got somebody in Britain who's on the run from the court cases in France. He's got asylum in Britain, as it were. I don't know quite how that works. You've got Professor Foreison, who's been in and out of prison. You've got, I mean, I'm really annoyed. I can't remember the name of the most famous revisionist of all. I mean, he only came out of prison and then died just 6 months after.
I know who you mean. I can't remember who you mean. Maybe somebody in the chat knows.
Myself, I can't remember his name. I mean, he's an absolute hero, total legend.
I mean, I was just saying before that when you go back in through the decades in Britain, where I'm familiar.
Ernst Zundel.
Yeah, Ernst Zundel it is, yeah. If you go back, I was saying before that it's Jewish lobby groups and Jewish members of parliament who've been time and time again trying to basically, in one way or another, strangle us on all of these laws. And just on the Holocaust, the Jewish Labour MP Gerald Kaufman tried to introduce that into Britain in 1998, I think. And it was where Holocaust now would be made illegal in Britain. And it didn't get through, and we've probably got some old school Tories to thank for that, you know.
I think a couple of years ago, maybe it was last year or the year before, they introduced some legislation, something advising what anti-Semitism means. So as part of that, you're not allowed to talk about any hint of a conspiracy that Jews related with the banking industry or media or anything like that. You're not allowed to talk about any of those conspiracies, or it's a hate crime or something like that.
Yeah, and that's going to land on Amar Road's desk, and that is being processed.
It's passed. That's the new working definition of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, the working definition of anti-Semitism. So what they've done there is, if you just take the Holocaust denial thing, it's where anti-Semitism will be illegal, and then you can deny the Holocaust, but the Holocaust will be anti-Semitic, and that will fall within those guidelines, and they'll do you for that. So they're still going to sneak that in through the back door.
This grossly offensive thing as well, because if they can say that Alison Chablot's songs are grossly offensive because they've got revisionist material in there, then they can refer to those songs to anyone who does any revisionist work and say it's grossly offensive because it was found to be grossly offensive in this trial. This is why it's important that it goes up before a jury. You know, as you were saying before, we need to get case law on this. The case has dragged on for well over a year now, possibly even 2. And she still hasn't been up before Crown Court with a jury. But that's what needs to happen. People need to argue their case. Don't plead guilty. Make sure that you get seen before a jury, because sooner or later we're going to have somebody really articulate that stands in front of that jury and blows this all apart. I mean, it might well be Jez Turner when it gets that far. But they wear people down. They drag the court cases out. They put them all under bail conditions in the hopes that they're just going to plead guilty to get it all over and done with. Alison Chablot has refused to do that, and that's really what needs to happen.
Do you remember going back 6 or 7 years, there was somebody, Emma West, on the tram, and she had this sort of racist rant against, do you remember that one, Sven?
Yeah, I do.
And that was an interesting story. I mean, that was huge at the time, and it went viral, and that was how I found Rams Paul's videos. And I'll always be grateful for that, because his video went viral, some of the people who are new or may not know what happened. It'll probably still be kicking around on YouTube, but you had this. I think she was about 30, and she was a very working class Cockney girl, and she's on this London tram, and she was completely surrounded by by immigrants, non-white, and she just kind of had a breakdown, and she was just saying, "This is not my fucking England anymore. You're not British. You're not British." And the Africans, especially the women, and they started to take offence. And there was an African man about to get up, and this Emma West sitting there with a little blonde boy on her knee, his son. And she was absolutely destroyed in the press because somebody uploaded it to YouTube, like I say, it went viral, and it was brutal what happened to her. And under the YouTube video and the Twitter accounts and on Facebook and everything like that, there was just people saying the vilest of things about this woman. Honestly, it was horrible. And then the prosecuted her for like incitement to racial hatred and everything. They really threw the book at her, but she wouldn't plead guilty. And what they did was they took her kids away. They said she was mentally unstable. She kind of dug in for a long time, and it dragged on and on and on. And they ruined this woman. She ended up a complete nutcase. She was on pills and meds and everything. And they did. I mean, obviously, I don't know how things have turned out since. But yeah, she lost her kids, and she lost her job. She was a dentist, an assistant, like what do you call her? Like she helps the dentist out. That was a job. She got fired, and she ended up full of pills. And she ended up she was told that she had to go and get psychological help, and when she did, they pumped her full of drugs, all the psychotropes or whatever they call them. And the point is, it's that thing where the process is the punishment, because when it actually got to court, she actually got quite a light sentence. I think she got like 2 months suspended or something, or a big fine, but it didn't matter. The damage had been done. They didn't really need to send her to jail for years on end because, well, she'd been destroyed, and they'd made the example of her. They'd held her up. This white woman who's surrounded. She's saying it's a foreign country. This is not my Britain anymore. And they've made the example. They've scared the hell out of everybody else who might have them kind of thoughts. And the danger has gone. So the point is, it's not about justice. It's purely ideological. It's just about scaring the hell out of the native people to shut up. And in Emma West's case, like I say, it was that this idea of the process is the punishment, and it means you just don't want to get wrapped up in it in the first place. So you don't like what's happened to Alison Chablot and to Jez Turner and this Count Dracula. I mean that went on for 2 years or something, and they just grind you down, and it costs. Gilad Atzmon's asking for thousands of pounds in donations because he can't cope with the legal costs. It doesn't even matter if you're acquitted. Your life's been just destroyed. And I think the message is, don't mess with us. Stay away. Watch Celebrity Island, Celebrity Sex on the Island, and order pizzas and enjoy your iPhone. But just don't go into these areas. And Count Dracula, of course, has by accident.
Yeah, you were saying at the beginning that he's a communist. I think he says that he was a communist when he was younger, and he got a tattoo of like a hammer and sickle and a star on his chest. But he says that like he's grown up now and realized that it's like ridiculous and it's a bad philosophy and so on. But like him joking about Nazis and stuff as well, he's basically a normie when it comes to these sorts of political ideologies. He's not really all that invested in it either way, but That's what makes it sort of absurd when they come for someone like that. That's when it crosses the line for people like Sargon of Akkad and these skeptics.
Well, I've got a little bit of an anecdote actually. About 6 months ago, I was on Twitter and with Millennial Woz, and we were arguing against Sargon of Akkad, and it was based around Count Dracula. And I said, "There's only one group of people who are going to want to have you jailed for a Nazi pug, for what he did." And why not just admit it, for God's sake?
Yeah, funnily enough, that when they were looking at this, it also emerged that in the 1930s or something like that, there was someone in Finland who also trained their pug to do the salute in the same way, and he was put into court. He was dragged through court by the Nazis as well, and the Nazis didn't even find him guilty. So it's literally, they are worse than the Nazis on the exact same issue.
Right. So anyway, I was just telling a story there, and I actually put it that only one group of people are going to have you jailed for having a Nazi pug, and he replied to me and said, actually, most of the Jews have been supportive, and it's just, and this is literally what I said. I swear to God, if you do a Twitter search on it, it'll probably show up. He said, "This is the SJW Jews." That's how retarded these people are. They're like children. They really are like children, and they're not used to having to deal with real power and real censorship about what happens when you challenge real power. So that and they go on and on about the alt-right and the SJWs, and it's pathetic. This has got nothing to do with SJW Jews. What the hell is that?
They are subversive Jewish wanderers.
Yeah, I mean, what's happening is he's trying to understand what's happening to him, while staying within that sort of classic liberal framework. So all Jews are just a great bunch of individuals, but of course you're going to have SJW Jews, which you do, but it doesn't understand that the social justice warriors are creations of Jewish intellectuals. And this idea that, those pesky lefties, they've kind of hoodwinked some Jews into being censor happy. It's childish rubbish. It really is. Those pesky SJWs have conned a couple of nice Jewish people into being sort of censorious and shutting down free speech. This is the childish mentality these people have. I've got nothing but contempt for it. Well, yeah. I mean. And that same guy, I listened to just to kind of move on about. He had a interview, because I think in general the reaction to this challenge has been absolutely pitiful. It really has. It's really exposed them, in my opinion, worse than the Crown Tea fiasco. Because here again, I'll say it again. Here you've got a collective group, they're an ethnic collective group, they're taking away people's individual rights, they're taking away people's freedom of speech. That's a full deck. That's everything they hate, that's everything they oppose, and yet they won't name the problem. They will when it's Muslims. And in some of these videos that I've seen, they've been kind of, and Tommy Robinson did it again, we've got Al-Quds marching down the streets and nobody minds that. They don't have a clue what they're dealing with, or if they do, then they haven't got the balls to stand up and defend their own core principles. But what I was going to say was that I don't want to be too harsh on them, because we are in the same fight together, really. And that Count Dankula guy, I watched a couple of weeks ago a debate that he had defending this like silly liberalist stuff. And there was another YouTuber on there called Mr. Medica, and he's really funny. And I watched his Croton Tea videos when that thing was going on, and it was hilarious. I mean, I was in tears laughing at it, the videos he did on that. But I mean, I just want to nudge it along a bit, where he was saying, I don't care. So Count Dankula was saying, well, you know, I'm going to go to jail. I could go to jail. We don't have freedom of speech in Britain. So, yeah, you can say that it's all cringy and you can laugh at us all day. But I'm going to do what I can to try and change things for the better. And Mr. Medica was just laughing in his face and saying it's just all cringe, it's just all bullshit. I'm just going to carry on laughing at it all. And so I think we can say that, you know, the classic liberals are a bunch of pussies and they're scared to really face up to the realities of the world, and that's true. But they still believe in something. They're still sort of in the game. Whereas we're really surrounded by nihilists who don't care. And I think when it comes down to it, I'll have to side with the sort of classic liberals. And I'm sure everybody's thumbing the video down. But if somebody just sits back and says, I don't care, I'm just going to laugh at it all. I don't give a shit.
Well, ultimately, they are on our side. They're the same. They're part of our nation.
Yeah, but they wouldn't shut us down, either.
That Count Dankula, he has said that he doesn't mind going to prison. He's quite happy to go to prison, and this is a free speech issue. So he obviously feels very strongly about it, but he's confused as to who it is that's behind it.
Yeah, well, I think it has
still
been
good standing up for it, I think.
Yeah, it has been pointed out to them time and time again, though, you know. And
he's going to eventually realise it, isn't he? He's going to have to.
Yeah. Well, yeah. How aren't they? I mean, I've said it twice already. Here you've got a group which is everything they stand opposed to, and they're not going to name them. They'll do it if it's Muslims, they'll do it if it's nationalists, they'll do it if it's feminists or trannies or whatever it is, blacks, Black Lives Matter, but they won't go near this. And it's the same thing. It's just it's on a much grander scale.
And you also see people like Sargon of Akkad like cozying up to Jews. Like he did that speech with that talk in King's College London with a Jewish guy talking about Ayn Rand objectivist ethics and things like that. And then a few days after that, after Halsey got beaten in that debate by Mark Collett, Mark Collett absolutely trashed him in that debate, and then the video got taken down afterwards. I'm not sure if it's still up or if anyone can find it, but that debate was just really great. So Sargon of Akkad, after that, he was giving him like a softball interview, just going over all of Halsey's ridiculous talking points and just trying to make it so clear how much he agreed with Halsey and how on the side of Jews he is and how not anti-Semitic he is. And I think it's the same with Jordan Peterson and all these other people who sort of see themselves as classical liberalists or classical liberalistists. They're also desperate to show how not anti-Semitic they are. I think in the case of Sargon and Paul Joseph Watson as well, it seems like really obvious that they're obviously denying something that they put in place, a mental block. And Jordan Peterson as well, they want to sort of be accepted by the mainstream media, and they know that these sorts of positions are like public, like socially unacceptable. So they if they ever go there, that they know that they'll forever be tarred. But if you like, there's this video of Paul Joseph Watson from before he joined InfoWars where he's talking about all these exact same like he was talking about how Israel did 9/11 and all these other, like the Rothschilds. He was talking about all of these things, and then as soon as he joins InfoWars, and he gets asked about the Jewish question, he said, "Oh, I've never seen any evidence to suggest Jews. I don't know what you're talking about," and he does it in this really obvious way. So when like he reposted that link to that Jordan Peterson article on the JQ, like I almost wonder if he must be like hiding, not showing his cards and hiding what he knows. Like he must be doing that. So when he reposts this link, I almost wonder if he's wanting someone to like post the refutation underneath the link, which is what I did, and I got like 200 people liking it on Twitter or something. So you've got to wonder if he, in talking about this in this just like reposting this link, it's almost as if he wants people to see like all the refutation, so it can become more safe to talk about over time.
I think the people in question, the lobby groups in question, I think they've really overreached themselves personally. I mean, Count Dankula hasn't worked it out yet, but surely he must do when he sees Alison Chablo, who's being taken to court by the same people, or the same people are behind it. You're going to see Jez Turner in court soon with the same people behind it. I mean, these are quite high profile, and surely people are going to be questioning this when they see it in the newspapers. Hang on a minute, there's this group there that thinks that they can't be criticized, and it's not that people are saying nasty things about them, it's that people are just making jokes about them. I mean, we haven't even got laws to prevent us making jokes about the Queen, but we've got laws to say that we can't make jokes about Jews. Surely that's going to give people pause for thought.
Even then, Count Dankula was making jokes about Nazis rather than jokes about Jews, I would say.
I bet he's calling them
like even going anywhere near the subject, they get offended and want to shut down your freedom of speech.
Yeah, that's what it is. That he's stumbled into some territory that he doesn't understand. We did a whole hangout on this about the Holocaust, and that's their holiest of holies. All of their victim power emanates from the Holocaust, and you can put a little caveat in there and say, oh, this is actually taking the piss out of the Nazis or whatever. But the fact is, you've got a dog there, and you're saying, I think he said gas the Jews, and he was saying Sieg Heil, and you've got this cute little pug doing a Nazi salute, and there was like Hitler speaking in the background. Now you can say, I'm laughing at the Nazis, but the takeaway from it is that you're making light of the Holocaust. And if that gets out and everybody starts doing it, then they're not going to be that bothered when the Jews start pulling out the Holocaust card. That's what he stumbled into here. We did a whole hangout on the Holocaustianity, where it's this sacred, it's the foundation myth of the modern liberal post-World War II West.
Didn't Jews in America, they were asked about their identity, and the Jewish Americans said that the most important thing about being Jewish was remembering the Holocaust.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just absolutely central to their identity, like their modern group identity.
I mean, they believe it. It's a foundational myth from that's being put onto the European, onto the Gentile, because we'll feel guilty forever and then sanctify the Jew. But then at the same time, they've also pushed it onto Jews. So then they're traumatized through it in their own way. But then at the same time, it forms a sort of in-group bond that they have all been through it. So that becomes their myth as well. Their I wouldn't say a foundation myth exactly for the Jews, but they are all victims. They've been through this uniquely horrible thing, and we have to stick together, and we have to be suspicious of outsiders. Now that plays right into the hands of the most ethnocentric Jews, and they've used it. So they use it to form an in-group bias, and at the same time to demonize the European Gentile, and to like traumatize us with it as well, and make us feel guilty about it.
Yeah,
And
that,
so,
also in America, that in like I think 5 states right now, they've introduced these mandatory Holocaust classes in schools, and they're trying to push it in. That eventually they want to get it done in all 50 states. But that was one of the people who was in that Florida shooting. They were talking about, oh, I see this person every day in Holocaust class. I thought it was a joke the first time that I thought it was like a typo or a joke or something, but it's real. Like in 5 states, they have mandatory everyday Holocaust classes in schools.
I think they do over here, don't they? As part of the school curriculum to study the Holocaust.
I learned about it in schools, so. And it was just really hammered in about like. I realized afterwards, like only looking through the actual history, how selective the curriculum was when I was taught it. It's just like what every single thing we learned about the Second World War was about how the Nazis came to power and used that to persecute the Jews. It was all about how Jews were persecuted. Like I never heard about like the Balfour Declaration or any of these other things, or any of the like things that like the Jewish people actually did around that time. Like there was the revolution. They attempted to have a communist revolution in 1919. They basically ruled the Weimar Republic, and they did the same in Russia, like a couple of decades before that, and yeah, and the Holodomor as well. Like I never heard about the Holodomor until years after I'd finished school, and there's all these things are done. So any time any group of Europeans come together and try and assert what's good for Europeans, they're training all of these people to see it through the lens of, oh, these are Nazis coming to get the Jews. It's just like an entire brainwashing program to make people see anybody standing up for themselves. They want everyone to immediately think, oh, Hitler, Nazi, Holocaust, like constantly. They want it to be like a part of everybody's consciousness all the time.
The Holodomor is an interesting one as well, because you go back to like Steven Pinker and the way Steven Pinker looks at the world, and he's this cosmopolitan, liberal Jewish intellectual, and again he's from the big city. I'm hoping to do a standalone YouTube video on this with Feather soon. But he's looking at the world from that perspective, and from that perspective, the people out in in America, it'll be the Rust Belt, or in away from the big cities, especially away from London in Britain. They don't understand that world, and they worry about it. They worry about what people are saying out in the Shires and in the Northeast or in the Northwest, or in the same way that they do in America. They worry what people out in the Midwest are talking about. And the same pattern repeats itself again and again. And in the Soviet Union, the problem that they really had was, looking at from that point of view, if you're in Leningrad or Moscow or even Kiev, there was this huge nationalist feeling in especially around in Russia, which is why they had to break the back of the church and everything like that. The farms, the landowners, just the whole spirit of the country had to be ripped out. And in the case of the Ukraine, it was the most brutal that maybe has ever taken place on Earth, where they were worried about the nationalist sentiment. traditionalist sentiment and the feeling that they had with the church and the belonging on the land.
Yeah, so they restricted their freedom of movement. They disarmed all the populace. They went into their houses and took away any food. They confiscated all food that they had. Then they cut off the food supply and kept them in this closed space. And like over the course of a year was it? They starved to death like 10 million people.
Well, there was two. They did it a couple of times, but the one in I think it was 1933. There's actually a video online of Abe Foxman, who was in charge of the ADL at the time. I think he's retired, and he actually goes on a trip to Ukraine. And you can. I'll send you that. I haven't got it ready, or we could put it up. And so it's the Anti-Defamation League actually goes to the Ukraine, and this is on camera. And he's sitting there with these delegates from the Ukrainian government, and they're on a table, and he points out flat, "You don't talk about the Holodomor when we're here. We don't want to know about that." And then afterwards, and I'm not sure what it was. There's trade deals and a connection with Israel that was going on, but he puts it flat that. Don't talk about the Holodomor, because that's really not going to be helpful for what we're trying to achieve here, okay? And then afterwards, there's somebody, I don't know where, somebody with a camera approaches a Jewish woman who was with the Jewish delegation. And this is, I think it's from like 2007 or something this happened. And somebody approaches one of this Jewish woman, and he questions the what's just happened there, the way they just kind of shut down any discussion of the Holodomor. And she says, well, you know, the American Jews and the Israeli Jews are different. And we in America, we've learned how to play the white guilt game. You just keep going for that white guilt. Because that's what it was about was from the ADL and Israel. They were playing around with the Babi Yar. What's it called, Sven? Is it Babi Yar?
Babi Yar, yeah, that's maybe one of the.
Yeah, there was a new memorial going up, and the Ukrainians had made it universal, and the Jews weren't happy. The Jews wanted one just for them. So it was going to be that there was this kind of decade of horror, and our people suffered, your people suffered. Let's just put it behind us and moved on. And the Jews weren't having it. You need to drop the Holodomor. And they admitted it. And then afterwards, there's this Jewish woman, and she's saying, "Yeah, it's about white guilt. We play it. In America, we've learned to play it better than the Israeli Jews have."
It's the same in Armenia. They won't allow the Armenians to say that they've had a Holocaust or a genocide. They were almost all wiped out, and that was by Jews as well, calling themselves the Young Turks. Their suffering has to be completely unique. You know, we all have to bow down to their suffering, and just the slightest joke about it, they know, I guess, that if that was to be allowed, then people would see it for what it is, that it's just one bit of suffering among lots of suffering. There's nothing unique about it, nothing special about it. So they've got to clamp down on it really hard before people start joking about it and questioning it. And when you bring up the Soviet Union there, anti-Semitism was capital punishment.
Yes.
So, death penalty. And, they would love to have that today.
Yeah. I mean, it's a question. It's one of those questions you can ask not just Jews, I suppose, but the liberal establishment in general is, where's this going to go? How, if we're going to send it, like if we're going to send somebody to jail for teaching his dog to do a Nazi salute, then what happens when somebody does something actually racist? And what happens when somebody punches a Muslim in the face? I'm not advocating that. Please don't do that. God, they'll be after.
You know what happens. You saw what happened to that guy that put a bacon sandwich outside a mosque. He was given, like, he was put in prison for a year, and then put in, while he was in prison, he was murdered. So, like, no doubt this was another one of those cases where they've put people that they don't like politically in with violent people that they know are violent criminals, like violent gangs of Muslims inside the prisons. So, like, knowing full well that they're going to get like attack them. And that was one thing that Tommy Robinson's spoken about happened to him while he was in prison. Like, there was a guard that was sympathetic to him. He knew what was going to happen, so he made up some, like, fake charges so that he could arrest Tommy Robinson, so he wouldn't have to go into this cell with some violent Muslims. And also Paul Golding, the leader of Britain First, he just got attacked in prison by a group of Muslims. So that they deliberately put people that they don't like politically in with like violent gangs of Muslims.
But I just wonder if that's not what they're doing there is playing a game where they know that Tommy Robinson or Paul Golding will be attacked by Muslims in jail. And I just wonder if they could frame it in a way where you get, like, the death sentence for racism is
it's an unofficial one, isn't it? Putting white nationalists.
Could they make it official?
Muslim population, yeah. It's a way of, getting around it. Well, we don't have the death sentence, but you know that they're going to have to fight their way to life if they are stuck in a prison full of Muslims.
Could they make it official and remain within a sort of liberal paradigm? I don't think they could, to be honest.
I don't think they could bring. They claim to be so against the death penalty, don't they? They make a big fuss at the National Front call for the death penalty, and it doesn't matter that everyone wants it. We will never have it. And yet, you just brought up the case there of a white lad being put in a prison with Muslims, and he died. And we still haven't had the inquest. The other day, they said that they've released the body for an investigation now. But that's a year later, after the guy actually died. We still don't know how he died. We just know he was in a prison full of Muslims, and he was in there for putting bacon on a mosque door. Again, this is the double standard. I mean, you could put bacon on my front door, nobody would get locked up. I could put bacon on a church door, nobody would get locked up. But simply because it's this treasured ethnic minority, it's one of their buildings. Oh, well, that's a serious crime. You need to go to prison for that.
Yeah.
By the way, Kevin Crean is his name. I think someone said in the chat.
Yeah. I mean, from our perspective, it would be if you. I mean, we're talking about the Muslims now, but if you came out of your door and then somebody put a big, pasted a big poster saying Allah will rule or Allah Akbar on your door, Islam is the future of the UK or something like that. If they'd put that on your door, which is, let's say, the more or less the equivalent of what's happened to them, and then you saw the Muslim walking down the street who just done it, would you then expect that Muslim to be sent to jail where a bunch of white lads would kill him in a cell? To be honest, it just seems unthinkable, and yet that's what's happened. That's what's happened. And all these lefties who want to talk about institutional racism, if it was that's exactly what would have happened. They would be sending, say, Muslims to jails. You could send them in, like, the far end of Scotland, where the prisoners are actually going to be white, or actually in Northumberland, and then in the worst possible wing, where you've already locked up a ton of, like, nationalists and EDL types, and you know what it is? I still think nothing would happen to the Muslim, and that says a lot.
We should be well known for how welcoming we are to these peoples. We've opened up our borders, we've let them in, we let them have their own schools, we let them speak their own languages, we've brought in laws that place them in a higher position in society. To us, we've brought in laws to say that we should be replacing ourselves in television and in the police force with them, and we've bent over backwards for them. You know, it's complete nonsense to say that you know, we are racist, we're nasty to them, we are haters. I mean, we've got to be the most generous people in the world concerning foreigners. It's a complete lie, isn't it?
So, I mean, I just wanted, you know, we've maybe got 20 minutes left or something. I just wanted to, where I was out fishing today, and I was having to think about this, and I was thinking, what does all of this mean? Where we are now, and this increased censorship, does it mean? Is it the next state, the natural progression of globalism, and this was always going to happen anyway? Or is it where they are beginning to panic because the guy you know? And I'm not too sure what side of that I fall on. Was this always going to happen, even if people weren't posting, you know, satirical songs on YouTube or these jokes for the dogs, or you got Britain First, and even if none of that was happening, would all of these laws be being brought in anyway to kind of just further the white genocide project?
Well,
these laws were brought in 15 years ago. These aren't new laws. The laws that are being prosecuted now.
Right.
What we're seeing is stealth revolution.
Blair brought in like the Terrorism Act, the Mental Health Act, which is being used to like section like mothers and take away their children. The Communications Act, which is being used, and he also, I think, he repeals the death penalty for treason.
Yeah, I mean,
and he started mass immigration, and he did the Iraq War, which was part of that project for New American Century, basically about like the Greater Israel project.
Yeah, and the new Labour government under Blair, especially in the early years, had the highest percentage of Jewish people of any cabinet in British history. So
yes, that I sort of see it as more of a natural progression of the globalism, and even that is a natural progression from the Soviet Union. Like the people who are like governing the Soviet Union have moved over to the West, and now they've been even before that they were sort of like trying to subvert like Western culture and go in through the institutions and all these sorts of things, and now they're in government and they're moving this project from the Soviet Union, and they're trying to do it in the West now. That's
I mean,
I think what's really telling is that we now have a so-called conservative government. So the only alternative we have at this stage is something to the left of this. So where do we go? What option do we have? I mean, we have a conservative government now oppressing people for saying things that aren't even particularly objectionable, and the only alternative we have is to the left of that.
They ban we have a conservative government who ban sexy conservative babes who want to come in and test out free speech and draw some pictures of Allah. For crying out loud, it's I don't know. I mean, what I was getting at was that just in this general, the last few weeks has been pretty crazy. There has been an uptick in the amount of censorship and just I mean, you know, Count Dracula, these trials have dragged on for years, I suppose. So there is that. It's just in the last few weeks, things do seem to have cranked up quite a bit. And I'm just wondering if it's because the establishment is worried or if this was all inevitable anyway.
I think they are worried. If you look at the evolution of the laws, they have constantly been pushing them to try and make them more ambiguous and able to get more people in there. I mean, at first they had to prove that there was intent involved. There was intent to incite racial hatred. Then they changed it so that you no longer had to actually be intending to do that. And then they changed it so that it could be that if anybody overheard somebody and it wasn't somebody even deliberately speaking in front of somebody else. And now they've changed it so that it can be somebody else just taking offense on behalf of somebody else. And if you look at the recent advertisement from the London police, it's saying that if you think somebody else might be offended by something you've heard, oh, well, that's a hate crime. And the Jews are the ones that have been at the front of this, that have been pushing it. They're the ones that are pushing to get this grossly offensive term used so that they can silence criticism of the Holocaust. And this is because they weren't able to get in the Holocaust denial laws. So you can go right back to the beginning of the race hate laws, the hate speech laws, or the free speech laws. And this is what they've been pushing for. And people just haven't realized it. It's only now that it's, that it's getting really harsh, but they're going to keep pushing for it. Just look at the Soviet Union, capital punishment. So that tells you that's what they're aiming for. And we know what they're like. They will do it in increments. It's like when they wanted to get their own people into government. They did it by increments. They waited because each time the same party was in there, they would say, well, no, we're not going to change our vows to allow you in. So they just waited 30 years until a government was in power that was sympathetic to them, and they changed the vows so that Jews could become members of the British Parliament. So they will just wait until they see a chance, and then they will keep pushing for it. That's the way that I see it. It isn't something brand new. It's been going on all this time. It's just now that it's more public and more people are becoming aware of it. And this is what I mean by they're overreaching, because people are becoming aware of it. You can't help but become aware of it. I mean, this is why we're all baffled that Count Dracula can't work out who it is that he's actually up against and thinks it's the government. So I am confident that more and more people are going to wake up to it, because they really have overreached. I mean, look, Tommy Robinson talking about free speech and all the people that were at Speaker's Corner. He's making a huge issue of it. I mean, he's not that close to us and our ideals, but he brings people into our ideals. This is where they end up. They start off on Tommy Robinson and they end up here. So the more they push, the more they help us. It's a constant battle that we've been in all this time.
Yeah.
What did you see? Did anybody see Mark Collett's video on basically this subject about the Speakers' Corners rallies, and talking about how in general demonstrations don't change the politicians will never listen, and he talks about over the past 10 years or so, how all sorts of demonstrations and how the politicians have never listened. And even about the Iraq war, there was 1 million people marched through London against the Iraq war and they still did it anyway. So these demonstrations don't really change much. And his suggestion was that we need to get people voting, and he talks about how migrant communities vote in blocks and how we need to start working together and forming communities and forming political parties and political movements and actually getting into government and becoming the government ourselves. So what do you think, should we reform the British National Party, or support this Anne-Marie Waters for Britain party, or what sort of political party can we do? How can we actually affect that change? What do you think is the best way to do that?
Well, I mean, first things first. The first thing that's going to happen to any kind of, you're going to have to define the nationalist party. I mean, are we going to go full ethno-nationalist in the party manifesto? Because you can't, basically. So you'll be made illegal. So your party will be just shut down. And so then you're going to have to cook on a few issues. And you can discuss what those issues should be and everything like that. So, I mean, it's all very well. I get this a lot. I get this a lot where people will say, well, you're all just wasting your time on the internet, and we need a party and we need to do it now. And then my reaction to that is, well, okay, just do it. It's like everybody's waiting for somebody else to do something.
It's outdated thinking. Oh, we've got to have a party, a political party. We're not on a level playing field. They've got tons of money, tons of backing. We've got two parties that are in power. That's not a level playing field. But we have got the internet. That is a level playing field. We can put our blogs out there. We can put podcasts out there, videos out there. Everyone can see them, and that affects, that affects the general public opinion.
Yeah, politics is downstream from culture.
So what I would say, I mean, the problem. This is where you get into the problem with nationalist purity spirals, because I and Jim will probably have something to say about this, but I've been quietly. I haven't checked her out for a while, but when Anne-Marie Waters' For Britain party arrived, I thought, yeah, I like the look of this, and she's talking about, she's actually saying white people. I watched one of the speeches before Christmas. Like I say, I don't know what's been happening since, but she had this speech.
I think thousands of people she's speaking to today at the Football Lads Alliance.
Right. I mean, I don't know much about them, but Mark Collett did a video on them as well where he's quite critical. But I really can't say I don't know about them. But I was happy that she said, like, in a speech, a lot of people are going to be uncomfortable with this, but we have to address it, and it's that white people are under attack. The establishment seems to be at war with white people. And I thought that was great. And I thought I'd love to see, because she's the best candidate around that exists now. And I'd love to see Anne-Marie Waters speak like that on Question Time. I think it would be great. I think it would be earth-shattering if she could put across some of her points on Thursday night on that awful bloody BBC programme. But here we get.
I think rather than that, it would just be best to attack the BBC in general, make it more of a meme and talk about it a lot more. The fake news and getting people to cancel their TV license and going along that attitude rather than.
Yeah, well, okay, but you're still talking about a program which is going into the homes of like 10 million people. And
but making it, you can see how with CNN, just by everybody calling it fake news, that completely undermined the credibility of CNN. I really think we should do something like that against the BBC as well and attack the credibility of.
Not an either or, Arya. You do both.
Yeah.
You get your people onto the BBC, undermining the BBC as being part of the liberal elite from the BBC.
Well, I think even wasn't Nick Griffin when he was on it. He was talking about how, all of these people that just go on the BBC and say, "Oh, the BBC is biased" and blah blah blah. But wouldn't it be better to just not interact with them and just call them fake news and refuse to go on, just get everybody to refuse to go on to BBC, so it becomes so clearly just obvious that the BBC is biased.
We already do that. We can do that and have somebody on the BBC using our talking points. We've been undermining it for years. It is undermined. Everybody knows a lot of people know it's shit, but it would still, we can do that and have somebody on there undermining it from the BBC itself, from using the BBC platform to undermine the BBC platform. But what I was going to get back to with Anne-Marie Waters, because people will be calling me out for it, is that, I like it that you're going to get somebody like that. They're going to get it. They are. So I think she is going to get quite big. And so from, let's say, the white nationalist perspective or an alt-right perspective, it's great to see that she kind of gets it. But then she's going to she's going to talk about how all these poor Jews are having to flee France because, the Muslims are being nasty to them. And she's going to counter signal us and all of that kind of thing. And when I still had a Twitter account, I would tweet her quite often saying, we can't support you when you do this. When you start whinging on about Palestinian terrorists and all of these problems in the Middle East and how Israel's this beacon of freedom and all of that, we can't support you doing that. You know?
Well, it's sort of like an optics game. That's the debate about optics. You can see how Paul Nealon in America, he was just sort of going all out against, like, just saying things directly, and he got his Twitter account nuked, and he's just come under like a huge assault by the establishment. So, like, that's like the optics debate in a nutshell, really, isn't it?
Yeah, but she doesn't look. Nobody's asked. No, I don't think many serious people expect Anne-Marie Waters to go on Question Time and deny the Holocaust and let's say something like, you know, international Jewry is wiping out white people or something like that. But she doesn't have to. She doesn't have to. I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to be crude, but she doesn't have to kind of fawn before them either. Why not just say, well, I'm indifferent to the problem? Firstly, I don't care. I don't give a shit about what's happening in the Middle East with Israel and Palestine. That's none of my business. And I'm not really interested in the victim mentality that the Jews have either. She can just say, I don't care about that stuff. I care about our people here. Just play it neutral. She doesn't.
There's another angle to it as well. Is that the fact that she does suck up to the Jews, and she may have counter signaled us a bit. That has actually got her on the television. I've seen her on talk shows on a Sunday morning where they have debates, and she's been there criticizing Sharia law, criticizing Islam, criticizing immigration, and they would never have any of us on there. They never had anyone from the BNP on there or anyone from National Front, but they will have her on there. So you can look at her strategy. Yeah. It has worked. It's got her people and it's got her on the television. But that's not all our strategy. We've got us. We can wake people up to the Jewish question. Anyone that researches Anne-Marie Waters' work is going to come across our work.
Yes. Where is she from? I thought she was originally a UKIP member, but someone has said in the chat that she's ex-Labour.
Both.
And she's a lesbian.
Someone in the chat has also said that she's actually bi, but what does it really matter?
Christ almighty. she's hardly a standard bearer of liberal values, is she? Of traditionalist values.
But that's all we've got on the political side of things. That's the only successful political wing of, you know, the nationalist movement.
The lads are going to be spitting feathers here because, and I can understand why, because they're saying that Anne-Marie Waters, the great hope of British nationalism, an Irish commie muff diver.
But she is very good on the, you know, on the rape gang question, on immigration. She is now starting to talk about the white race. She's talking about white genocide, about us being replaced. She's bringing race into it. You know, there's a lot of good things about her as well as these bad.
The problem is, let's say you've got you're one of these, let's say one of these big alt-right Twitter accounts. You've got 10,000 followers. Whenever you show any kind of support for Anne-Marie Waters, you're going to be called out by our own side, and you're going to have the fact that she's a dyke thrown straight back into your face. I know it because it's the same with me with the blog, and you're going to be called a cook and all the rest of it. And I can understand why. I could defend it if she wasn't a Jew lover, if she wasn't this sort of Zionist Shabbos guy. I could say, well, you know, she's not into that, but she is, and that's the problem. I don't know how. That's why I tweeted her lots of times. We go up. It's great. Talk about the Muslim gangs. Talk about Islam. Definitely talk in racial terms. That's what we want. But we can't. You're alienating us with all of this sort of pro-Israel stuff and kind of white knighting for the Jewish community. because we're constantly under attack from the people that you are defending and that you kind of sanctify. They're trying to have us jailed.
Point that out, isn't it? Point that out to her. Praise her when she does right and criticize her when she does wrong, and bring up when she brings up this Count Dracula thing, and when Tommy Robinson does, and when Ricky Gervais does, bring up Alison Shablow and say, all right, you're standing up for him. You say you're standing up for free speech. Well, how about standing up for Alison Shablow then as well? You know, if it's only free speech that you don't mind listening to, then it's not really free speech, is it? It's got to be free speech that you don't like to hear. You've got to be standing up for.
Yeah,
and play it from that angle, and you know, we might get some support from them. I did that with Ricky Gervais. I sent him one saying it's the same group of rich killjoys that are going after another performer, Alison Shablow, that went after Count Dracula. You know, you pick your wording that you use to try and get these people interested, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, it's been a bit of a black pill one. I normally like to have a few belly laughs in here, but it's been quite serious tonight.
The fact that she was speaking in front of this Football Lads Alliance, because that is masses of people, thousands of people.
What are the Football Lads Alliance all about? Then I'm not familiar with them.
It's Tommy Robinson's crowd. Is it Veterans Against Terrorism or Football Lads Alliance, something like that? They had a huge march in London a while back, and I think there was about 60,000 people there, and they weren't specifically speaking about Islam. And the fact that she's there speaking to them, it will be specifically about Islam and immigration. So I think that's great that there's, you know, thousands of people that have turned out, and she's got a chance to speak to them because she has got a good message. She's very good on that. You know, she's got all the statistics. She knows all about the rape gangs, knows what's happening with the immigration, and all these people will have heard that, and maybe they'll support her political party. And as you say, that's all we've got on the political side of it. On the propaganda side of it, we're doing really well. You know, we've got you, we've got myself, we've got all the YouTubers, Millennial Woes. I mean, what's he got? 100,000 subscribers now?
And like 46 or something, yeah. 46,000.
Great propaganda we've got.
Yeah,
now.
It is. I mean, some of the regulars, when I started posting about these liberals and these skeptic communities, it was weird because for us who've been into this, like me and you, Sven, who've been into this for a long time, they thought it was weird that we were moving, we were beginning to attack these like liberal YouTubers, and they didn't get it. Like, what's the point of all of this? And it's mainly about moving forward and tackling other because you've got other people who are in the game, which I kind of got into before. And I liked that there was a great Greg Johnson essay about taking apart libertarianism, which was great, which is a sort of template. There was another one at the Occidental Observer. So you've got other people, all these other political factions, and I do think it's good to smash them down and debunk them, and basically just take over their base of support and show that we are right and they are wrong, and they'll see the better ideas and the sort of harder truths that we have to offer. It's worked. I mean, I think everybody's showing over the last year or so, everybody's had like this huge increase in viewers or readers or whatever it may be. And so that is this just moving into new territories and looking for, because from our point of view, these classic liberals, these liberalists, you can see it now where, and you know, I'm going to say it again for like the fourth time, they've got the ethnic collective, they've got the people who are attacking their free speech, they've got the people who are attacking their individual rights, they've got the people who are warping the democratic process, they've got the people who are really just pissing all over their core ideals, but they're too scared to name them. They're too scared to make videos about them for 100,000, 200,000 people that they will happily make for Muslims. And they won't do it with this group. And I suppose when you're aware that the ADL is censoring YouTube, and this video has got a very, very high chance of being debunked, and my channel will go. Very high chance of that happening. But I don't have much writing on this financially. If you're getting, a few £1,000 a month, if you're on like Sargon's on $9,000 a month on Patreon subs, or whoever it was, if you're getting $500 per video because you've got to set it up like that, then yeah, what are you going to do? You've got a mortgage to pay, and that I can appreciate that, but don't try and tell me that you're honest and that you're it's all about the ideas and being true to your principles. Piss off! It's about the Patreon account, you lying twat.
We're the ones that can
anyway.
we can keep our consciences clear, and we say what we know to be the truth, and we're not saying it because we're beholden to anyone paying us any money.
Yeah, with or without this YouTube channel or the blog, I'll still be in a factory next week. I know that. What if you do want to sign up for a donation or a tip in the jar? That's great. Or to Sven or Arya. No, there's the pitch on Radio Aryan and Sattya.
Thanks, Morgoth.
We'll put the links in below. So I think I've pretty much said my piece on the liberalist censorship Pogo cost.
Yeah, we don't really have like the perfect answers for like how to turn all this momentum into like real political change at the moment, but I think that's what we need to be focusing on, like the best way to actually start affecting that change. That we don't like do we support Anne-Marie Waters or not, like that's a discussion to be had, but those are the sorts of discussions we need to be having now.
Well, we can discuss them all we want. It's not going to change anything.
Well, I mean, in general, like, that's what people need to be focusing their thoughts and energy on.
Well, okay, I'm not going to form a political party. I don't know anything about real world politics. If somebody is out there and they want to do it, then that's great, and I'll support them all the way. The most famous nationalist sort of person who's been involved with real world politics is right now, who is of a decent age, is Mark Collett himself. I'd love to see him perform.
Yeah, that's what he talks about. These we need to get voting and stuff. Like I would like 100% support him if he wanted to make a party.
I'd love it. I'd love for Mark Collett to form a party. I'd be right on board. I'd help him as much as I could. But I mean, what do you want to say? Until somebody actually stands up to bat and forms a party, there's nothing really to discuss. Or what you're going to have to do is take the next best option and then argue about whether...
Well, it's the same as when everyone was going on to Sargon about, oh, Sargon, you're the leader of something, you're the leader of a movement. And then he ended up forming this liberalists group. So when you like constantly hammer onto somebody about the importance of making a movement, and everybody in the comments keeps like leaving comments talking about how we're going to start affecting change, maybe that will force somebody to see that there is a desperate need for an avenue to take all this momentum down to start affecting real change.
Yep.
Advance. If you're good at doing something, then you have to do it. Mark is very good at what he does, and hopefully he will keep advancing, and then one day will be leading a political movement. But you can't have all your eggs in one basket. You can't say, well, we're just going to wait until Mark Collett does that, or well, we're just going to support Anne-Marie Waters. You have to support everything. Do everything that you can to help, I think.
And I think what I tried to get at before was just the general state of play, where we do have this increase in censorship. And I mean, I did a blog post about this, about how the British government, are they monsters or are they morons? Because we're going to have to go with the monster, considering the discussion we've had tonight, we're going to have to go with the monsters option, because we know who's behind the government and we know who's putting pressure on them, or who constitutes the government. And so the monsters option is that they just don't care that they are, because when they ban Laura Southern and the other one, and then that puff who sort of runs around after Tommy Robinson, what is he?
Kaylin Robertson, you mean?
I mean, the government do look like monsters and they don't care. So what we're beginning to see now, with every Count Dracula's another one. Okay, we can have a laugh at the liberalists and we can, pull them apart because they're weak tea. But each of these things is that the elites are alienating themselves more and more from the common people. And when you're talk about forming a political party, it's going to have to be based on not this sort of nostalgia, but the situation as it is now, and addressing the situation as it is now, and looking to where it's going to go. But definitely, what we're going to see is this is going to increase, where the sort of the Guardian, BBC, Westminster elite is going to become more and more hated and more distant from the almost all white people in the country eventually. And I think the race is whether the white people in the country can mobilize themselves and get some form of representation before we're just completely outnumbered and can't do anything about it anymore. And Steven Pinker, in his book on Enlightenment Now, I mean, is banking on the fact that we won't mobilize and we won't get anything done before it's too late. So the nationalist or our party of the future can make huge gains on exploiting this attitude. And I would make that the central platform, without talking about mass deportations and denying the Holocaust and all of these kind of things. I would really go in at it as a general populist movement, talking about this aloof establishment, while at the same time pointing out that the left are the lapdogs of the elites, because that kills lefties. They can't stand it. They can't stand to have it shoved in their face that they do everything for the establishment. So I would go in on those two talking points to start with, and I really don't know how they could deal with it, because you could take a moral position that the so-called enlightened liberal progressives just jail everybody who disagrees with them, which is true. And the problem is, in order they'd have to react against that in a certain way, which would be even more draconian and then make things even worse. That this is the sort of spiral that they're in now. So that's my parting shots on this, actually. Anybody else?
I think Jacob Rees-Mogg is quite promising. I saw an article for him earlier that was just listing what was good about him: anti-abortion, anti-immigration, anti-EU, and the imagery that was used by it was quite clearly alt-right imagery, which shows that we are having an influence on these people. I mean, this is the Conservative Party that are promoting Jacob Rees-Mogg, and they're using imagery that comes quite clearly from the alt-right. So they are obviously looking at our stuff, and I'm also encouraged by the fact that there's a Conservative MP that's calling for a debate on free speech, and to do with this episode, with this Count Dankula. So, you know, that's so I say that there are some monsters in government and there are some idiots in government, but I'd like to think there are still some good people. There's also a Lord in the House of Lords that Tommy Robinson was speaking to the other day, and he was excellent. I didn't think we had anybody like that left in the country. You know, I was really impressed with him, and he was saying that there's a new leader of UKIP that's very good on Islam, and it would be good to be supporting him as well. So there's definitely some support there in the establishment, and there's also a big movement, a big populist movement, which is, you know, which we see with the Football Lads Alliance, and also now we see with For Britain. And we've also got a big movement that is centered around people on the internet, centered around these new internet, you know, for want of a better word, celebrities. I mean, there's more people, there's more subscribers to Mark Collett than probably there were members of the BNP. You know, this is all encouraging, but it's all about looking at things today instead of trying to do things like we did them in the past. We've got to make use of every tool that we have at our fingertips today, and make sure we use it, you know, to prevent white genocide and to be pro-white with it. Make use of everything.
The establishment always sort of talks about how they've sort of defeated the BNP, and they've pushed all of these like ideologies that's the impression they have, that they've pushed all of these ideas to the side and there isn't really a political opposition to anymore. But the reality is that there are so many people who are against the establishment and what they are doing. And every time they like bar someone from entering the country in a high profile way, like they did with Brittany Pettibone and all these other people, and this case with Count Dankula, and just all of these extreme things that keep happening, they're sort of shooting themselves in the foot, because it just wakes people up to the reality of how bad things are starting to get.
I mean, the banning of Brittany Pettibone and Lauren's son, I've been told it's not Laura, it's Lauren, is, I mean, I did a post on it. It was just a PR disaster. It really was. And that it's going to carry on. And so they're going to try and shut down more people, and then more people are going to cry foul, and more people are going to be getting red-pilled. Well, what the hell is all this about? And this is what I mean. They're on a downward spiral. And this is what we need to capitalize on in the here and the now. It's to turn the weight of the machine against the machine itself.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
All right.